welcome everybody. Welcome to the Weekly Watt for Saturday, April 16th, 2022. I am one of your hosts, Colin Jenkins, alongside the future of fitness himself, aka Mr. Montana, Eric Malzone.
Right on. Colin, fun to be here, man. And that intro music, whatever that was, that fired me up. That was really good. So good. I'm excited to spend a Saturday morning with you and talk about tech. This is a joy.
For sure. How's everything in Montana? What's the weather like over there, man?
We got cloudy and 32 degrees this morning. So we thought spring was here a couple weeks ago, but it's winter's back. We got some cold weather, man, but it's nice. It's peaceful. It's calm here. Usually, in the shoulder seasons, which we consider April and basically October, gets really quiet. The locals get it back and not as much tourism. So I'm enjoying it. And I got my Traeger grill. I was telling you before, cooking some brisket right now, which is my first attempt with the barbecue technology. We don't have to get into that, but
connected barbecue. That's the other show is connected barbecue channel. So in terms of you've been doing podcasts for a long time. For people who haven't seen or heard you before, maybe tell us a little bit about the Future of Fitness podcast and when you started that and what that's all about.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So I started the Future of Fitness podcast back in 2017. So people may or may not know, you and I have known each other for quite some time, back in the CrossFit days, and we owned a gym together for a short span of time. And when we decided to leave California, sold, my shares of the gym and my other gym, and we hit the road. I needed something to do. Right. So I'm like, I had a friend, Doug Holt, who kept telling me, hey, you should try this podcasting thing. I'm like, I kind of like podcasts. Joe Rogan was just starting to get cool. And I'm like, well, screw it. What do I need? Right. And all I really needed was Zoom, my headsets, and my computer, and I could start interviewing. So I started interviewing people, like mostly friends in the industry, people I'd known a little while. Dan John came on for like episode number 3, which for people in the strength game, that was like, like God, right? So fast forward now, it's evolved quite a bit. It's, year 5, maybe 6, I guess, 5. Wow. I've done with the Future of Fitness, I've released almost 275 episodes. It's a weekly show. I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs and innovators, futurists, things like that within the fitness, health, and wellness technologies. And it's more of a business to business show. And then I also had the Fitness Blitz Radio, which I did 360 episodes of. That was a daily show for a while. But that became a little bit too much work, as you could probably imagine. And then I have another one that's kind of just a project of mine called Black Diamond Podcast, and I've done about 60 of those. So all in all, I've probably released, about 700 podcast interviews over the last 5 years, and it's a lot of fun. I mean, podcasters don't get paid a lot, so I do it because I like it.
That's awesome, man. I've done 3, so I'm catching up, man. Watch out.
697 more.
Yeah. So let's get this started. Ladies and gentlemen, again, welcome to the Weekly Watt live show, where each and every week we come together to nerd out about everything in the connected fitness and health world. If you like that, you can head over to our YouTube channel and subscribe at Connect the Watts to watch the show live, or you can find the Weekly Watt podcast later on any major podcast platform like Apple or Spotify. Joining us later on in the show will be the founder and CEO, Stephen Webster, an expert on computer vision tech, to help us understand the potential of AI and connected fitness. But for now, let's talk about some news. We've got 5 items on the news block this week. The first 2, unsurprisingly, have to do with Peloton. So this week, Peloton had a big announcement that they would both be increasing their monthly membership price while also lowering the price that they're selling their equipment, like their bike and their tread. And so this has kind of caused like a reaction, a mixed reaction within, the Peloton community and from, people, interested in it. So I wanted to kind of like detail that out for you and kind of get your thoughts on it. But so the Peloton membership is kind of broken down into like it's kind of scattered. So there is a digital membership, which people who just have like the app pay. And I think that's like around like $10 or $12 a month. Then there is the all access membership, which is what people who have the Peloton bike or the tread pay. The biggest difference for that is being that they have access to like their statistics and they can see their metrics, while they're taking classes. And then the new membership is for their brand new Peloton guide, which we'll talk about in a bit. And that one is $24 a month. So you can use the Peloton guide tool. But at the end of the year, that's going to be increased to the all access price. And then this week they've announced that they're going to increase that price from $39 to $44, which isn't a huge increase. But I think part of the reason why people kind of are upset about it is because they're also simultaneously lowering the price of their bikes and treads by quite a bit. And people are feeling like they're lowering the price. And like they're increasing the membership price so they can lower the bikes and treads because they want to have those sell better. But members feel like who bought the price or the bike at a much higher cost feel like they're paying that cost themselves when they already paid the higher cost. So I don't know if what your feelings are on that, or if you think that was like a good strategy, or just kind of get your thoughts.
Yeah, it's been a mystery what Peloton's been up to the last year. I mean, when you look like just from a business perspective and the overall landscape of connected home fitness, they've definitely had their missteps as far as management, it would seem. And as the pandemic led up, the demand on such connected home fitness equipment it didn't, it's not going anywhere. It's still going to be around, but the pendulum's kind of swinging back and the whole industry is recalibrating, and the consumer demands are recalibrating. So it's an interesting time. Now, when you look at something like that, I think the holy grail of most businesses nowadays is MRR, so monthly recurring revenue.
Yeah.
And that's, if you're looking at just hardware sales and you don't have that reoccurring revenue on the back end, then, it doesn't become as attractive to shareholders, investors, right? They want to see consistent quarter over quarter revenues. So is it a good move by them? I don't know yet. We'll find out. We'll look at the next quarterly reports and see how they do. But they're in some hot water right now. That's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think they're just under the microscope. So anything they do becomes, a heavily contested issue. I try to look at these things, from two perspectives, one from the consumer and then one from like the business aspect. I think it sucks kind of for the consumer, especially for people who, like Barry McCarthy, the new CEO who took over, like literally said less than 1 month ago that he would not be raising prices on current members.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So, the time in terms of like the messaging and timing and stuff, I think they could do a better job. $5 obviously isn't the end of the world for an increase, especially now when everything's increasing by at least that much. So it's no shock that it is increasing. So I think part of it is that, like, being told that it wouldn't be increased and then it is. And then I think the other part of it is having such a big disparity between, the digital members who pay $12 and all access members who are paying $44, but with very little difference in terms of the actual content they're receiving. The only real difference is having those metrics. And so I think a lot of people are questioning, like, is it even worth to, buy a Peloton bike when you could get, a different bike and just run Peloton classes and save like $400 a year? So, I think just that's maybe causing a lot of the issues. But, on the business side of it, I think it's smart. Barry McCarthy is obviously a data guy. The value of memberships is obviously, the profit margins of a membership is obviously significantly higher than equipment sales, and their equipment sales are much slower than they used to, and they have a huge a huge inventory. So what are you going to do? Like, lower the prices of the inventory and then make no additional profit? Like, their only way to kind of increase the profit probably at this point is to really, adjust those memberships. So we'll see. I wouldn't be surprised though to see that digital membership jump up in price by double within the next year. I think they're just kind of like layering things one step at a time. So, we'll see. Have you heard about their like bike rental program?
No, not yet. But I want to get back to that one too, because you look at like Whoop, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And well, actually, let me start that over again. I think You made a really good point, is that they're under a microscope. Peloton is. I mean, they are essentially like what Airbnb and Uber were to their associated category, the breaking a new category, right? Like now everyone just says Uber, everyone just says Airbnb. Just like at one point, someone just called a tissue Kleenex and, lip balm chapstick, right? They're the leading brand name for that. So they're always going to be under a lot of scrutiny, but they're going to also, probably face the most growing pains. But you look at like something like Whoop, and I know we can't compare it because the Whoop hardware is so much less expensive to make, but they give that for free now, right? And they're just looking for a 12-month membership. So I think you look at like how Whoop's, they're probably looking at Whoop, who's crushing it. And then they're like, okay, how do we get more to of a Whoop model? And I think that's an interesting thing to watch from the outside.
No, and I think that's a good comparison because like Whoop, a few years ago they were valued at, a few $1 million. Now they're valued at, several billion, I think.
I think it's 4 billion.
4 billion, yeah. So, and part of that growth really came from, instead of a $500 Whoop band, you can pay nothing for it, but your membership has been increased. And so ultimately, way more people are willing to, adapt it and get it. And long term, they probably make more money per unit because for two reasons. One, because if I pay $20 or $30 per month for this for 3 or 4 years, that's a lot more than I would paying $500. And then two, and this is what I think, why I think Peloton is really going to that direction, is they want to, try to disrupt that resale market, because, with fitness equipment, with all fitness equipment, doesn't matter if it's a Peloton or if it's something else, most people who buy it, or a good proportion of people who buy it, are not going to end up using it after 6 months or so. It's just going to become a coat rack, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how good it is. People are just lazy, and it's hard. I mean, it's getting better to figure out ways to gamify things and get people more invested in coming back. But ultimately, there's going to be a percentage of people who are never going to use it for the most part. But so when Peloton sells, millions and millions and millions, like millions of units, not millions and millions, but millions of units, and then their demand drops and the people have stopped taking the classes as much because maybe they're going to the gym or doing other things, you see that used market just explode. And that also hurts their sales. It doesn't hurt their memberships because if I sell my bike to somebody else, there's still that same membership being collected, which is good, but they're losing out on future sales that they could have. And so I think that's where you go to that Whoop model. I can't sell you my Whoop. I mean, I could, but you'd be stupid to buy it because you'd have to pay literally the same exact price to get a brand new one for yourself. And I think Peloton is thinking, oh, that's maybe a really good direction for us, where, the resale value of your bike is so low that like it makes no sense to sell it. So then the resale market, goes lower and lower. And that was going to my point, is they started up a bike, and I don't think they've done treadmills yet, but a bike rental program. So you can, if you live close enough to certain of their locations, you can rent a bike instead of purchasing one, but have a much higher, membership fee. And I think that's, very similar to that Whoop model. It also allows them to get rid of or to utilize a lot of the refurbished stuff. Because, if you're renting out a bike, it's not going to be a new one. It's going to be a refurbished one that they probably couldn't otherwise sell, at least, at a higher price. So it's a way for them to, reutilize some of the refurbished bikes, and also, again, lower that initial price point, like the Whoop, to hopefully, allow for a wider expansion of not just being considered like a luxury item where people have to pay, thousands of dollars to get started.
It's an interesting trend too. I mean, when you look at the markets, if we take a step back and look at it like from a macro level, and the younger generations tend to want less ownership and more access. So it's not like, they don't need to own a car. They could just Uber or ride share or do whatever. Right. That tends to be a trend that we're starting to see, and people just want access to these things, but they want, they just don't want a ton of stuff. I think it's a great trend. I love how younger generations seem to be less materialistic in gathering crap like we do as Americans. It's just like you said, like, buying one of these things 6 months later, it's, it's drying your towels right in the living room. So it's an interesting trend. I like what they're doing. So I think it could be good. We'll see.
Yeah, man. And so they lower the price, a good amount. And so that was the last thing I was going to say is I think another thing maybe that people kind of are upset about or just confused about is, Peloton's, they've changed the prices of their bikes and treads, I think 6 or 7 times in the past 8 months. It's went from, like, the Peloton bike went from 1,900 to 1,500 to 1,700, back down to 1,500, back up to 1,700, and now it's back down to 1,500. So I think they're just testing a lot of things out, trying to figure out what's going to work for them. But in the meantime, it's as a consumer, can be a bummer if you have bad timing, right?
Yeah.
But next up, so I want to talk about the Peloton guide. So the Peloton guide came out last week, and what this is, and we're going to talk about this more with Steven too, but this is, essentially Peloton's first, strength hardware, but it's basically just a camera, and the goal of which is to, make, I'm not, to be honest, I reviewed the thing. I've spent dozens of hours with it already, and I'm still not quite sure what the goal is, but so here's what it is. It's supposed to give you, I don't know. That's the thing, is it's supposed to help you with your strength workouts, but all it does at this point is it kind of keeps track of your movements. So like during a workout set, you won't get credit for it unless you're moving in kind of a similar area of your body for like 80% of that time. That's one aspect. And the other aspect is it puts a video of you on the TV, so you can kind of see yourself next to the instructor, with the idea being that, like a mirror, you could see yourself work out. You might be able to make some form corrections and maybe more easily identify, how you look compared to the instructor. That, and they initially this was going to be about $500. They were going to charge for it, and then it was like, what? That's yeah. And so that, they were able to lower the price down to $300. But I don't know. Have you seen this at all?
I watched your review, and
okay,
I'm just here's what I'm gonna say, right? Is that having you and I have been in this industry for a very long time, in the last 3 years, with the technology output and stuff like this coming out, a lot of connected home fitness stuff like that, you get a lot of technologists that don't know anything really about fitness, right?
Yeah.
And then you get people like you and me who actually lived fitness for a very long time, coaching it, right? Seeing from the ground up what works, what doesn't. And I see this, I see crappy coaching, right? I see like bad programming. I think strength programming, this is like some kind of cardio strength weird thing that they're trying to do, right? Just pump out repetitions and all that.
Okay, so to be fair, there are, so most of what you're saying is true. Like, most classes are very fast paced with very little rest. Which, I mean, look, if somebody only has 15 minutes to work out in a day and they want to do a workout and get some strength development in, then no, I mean, that makes sense. Like, I don't think it's necessarily bad. And they do have like 1 or 2 classes a week that are maybe a little bit longer, with a little bit longer rest, that are more, geared towards, more functional strength development. So, I don't know. I guess my problem is maybe not necessarily with the content side of things as much. Although obviously that's an issue. But it's the hardware side. It's like trying to evaluate what value will somebody
and what's the
get.
price point again on this, Colin?
It's $300. And so if you're a digital member, so if you're an all access member, you're paying with a bike membership or a treadmill membership, there's no additional membership fee. But if you're a digital member, so if you're an app user and you want to use the Peloton guide to kind of enhance your workouts, that membership is going to double to $24 until the end of the year, after which it'll go to the all access price of $44. So you're paying a lot more down the road to have this access with the guide.
And what do you think they're going after here? Like, what's the goal? Like, who's the market that they're trying to get? What's the incremental gain that you think they're trying to get out of this product?
I think that's kind of the problem, is that I don't think there was people asking for this.
Gotcha.
if there was rep counting and form feedback and people like that, but they weren't asking for something like this. I think this was more of a, hey, we acquired a company with some basic AI technology, camera tech. They had acquired, I forgot the name. I think it's like not Atari. It's like, I don't know. It's a yoga mat company it's like a connected fitness yoga mat that they had acquired with 3D camera tech. Maybe they try to use that for something quick while they develop a more robust strength, equipment. I think they just wanted something to show, something new to put out. And I think at the time of the development, if they put out anything regarding Peloton, it would have sold great.
Right.
And then maybe they ran out of cost to make this thing better. I don't know what happened with it, but it's obviously, it feels like it's not, it feels like it shouldn't have existed at this point with what it came with what it came with.
Well, here's to kind of wrap my thoughts around again too, is that, I applaud things that get people off the couch and moving, right? That's, as a fitness industry, we get the same 20% of the population all the time, right? But that other 80%. So if this helps get that, that's great. The other thing, not to be too critical, but I'm just going to go ahead and say is, like, a lot of times in the fitness technology area, people get really wowed by cool gadgets and things like that, but we forget about, like, well, is this actually getting better fitness and health outcomes for the people using it? And that's what I'm wondering, like, is this going to achieve that? I think Peloton, the original bike, undoubtedly got people fitter, right? People
I'm
loved
a
it.
big fan of the bike and the tread. I use them all the
It's
time.
huge.
I love their
right?
content, and their products are great. Yeah.
Yeah. And so for this case, like, is it doing that? And I guess we don't really know yet.
Yeah. I mean, we'll talk to Steven to see what he thinks we can do or
Yeah.
they can do to improve it in a second. We do have a few, we have a few more minutes before we jump in with him, but I do want to kind of cover a few other quick news updates for this week. The first of which is that, iFIT was nominated for a 2022 Sports Emmy with their Everest a Trek to Base Camp series. And
Cool.
this is the first time any connected fitness company has been up for any kind of Emmy nomination like this. And so I think it's really cool that, it's being recognized by like groups outside of just the fitness community as, valuable and interesting and high quality content. Have you checked out iFIT stuff at all? Have you ever seen any of their programs?
I'm sure I perused through their website, and I haven't downloaded the app and used it. So short answer, no, but I'm familiar with the brand.
Yeah. So I took probably like, so this Everest Trek to Base Camp, it's designed for the treadmill or elliptical. It's like 18 like 40 to hour long workouts. It's a big series.
Wow.
And it takes you, as it says, all the way to the base camp on Everest. It has like 3 different instructors. It's super well done.
Cool.
And it's I'm very excited that these companies are being recognized. I've always felt like, I feel like there should be eventually like some kind of reward show for the coaches that are really good, and obviously the production value of some of these programs is phenomenal. Some of the other nominees are like the college football road trip. So what they're nominated for is outstanding interactive experience. The House of Highlights from the Bleacher Report, NBA on TNT Tuesday, and NFL Slime Time. So I feel like they have a good shot to win this, because out of all of those, it's by far the most interactive. Like, you're actually interacting with the program.
So explain that to me, Colin. Like, what is the experience? You're watching on like a tablet, and then what are you physically doing?
So on this program, it's like a hiking program, basically, right? So you're following along instructors, usually one at a time on these. There's 3 that kind of lead you through here. And, with all their treadmills, they're all connected and they're all automatic. So they'll automatically automatically adjust the incline and the speed relative to the incline that you're seeing on the screen and relative to your current fitness level for the speed. And I tested it on their X22i, which has like an incline of up to 40%. So which is like you're like almost falling off that thing
Yeah.
sometimes. Like it's
Yeah.
actually impressive.
It's a steep pitch.
But yeah, so it actually makes it kind of like feel like a legit hike. It's good, and so you're just kind of following along. But what made it really interesting is just like the production value, like just being able to see everything. And the instructors were really good, just kind of really just teaching about Everest and teaching about all the different locations and the stories and their previous climbs and the history of it. It was really good, and no, I'm happy to see them be recognized for that. Also, additionally, just real quick, so yesterday, NordicTrack released limited edition S27i bikes with 2 new colors. And the reason I wanted to bring this up is because I haven't really seen this before. I've seen this before in a lot of other types of products of limited editions, but I haven't seen it with like connected fitness so much, where there's like a limited edition color or a certain only available for a certain amount of time. And I'm curious to see how it does for them, because I think it's actually really smart. Because I have the black one of these, and the white one looks really cool, and so I think it definitely drives.
That's how they get you.
It does. So I think it drives interest, especially in times maybe as we get towards summer, that there's less overall interest in indoor bikes and stuff, to kind of motivate people. But what do you think? If you do you have an exercise bike or no?
No, I'm old fashioned, man. I got a
You're
C2
an outdoor
rower.
guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I got a C2 rower. That's about it, just for the winter months. But most of the time I'm outdoors. But I do, like, I'll go to our gym and I'll use the spins occasionally. And but this is it's fascinating. Go ahead.
Let me ask you: would a C2 like, let's say your rower is getting old, and would a limited edition, like fancier C2 rower with some extra bells and whistles and like limited edition colors entice you at all, or no?
Would it
Probably
be
not
the same
you.
price?
Huh?
No, probably not me.
Yeah.
But I could see how it would. I mean, if it was relatively the same price, or if it had like, just like, I don't know, 5% more price on it, it had this really cool stuff. And then, but what am I going to do? Like, bring my friends over and be like, hey, check out my limited edition C2 rower. No one's going to give a crap. Right. But these also these are like art, right? Like, these sit in your living room for most people.
Yeah, no, I think so. Plus, you're more old fashioned. You're not even a millennial, I don't think, right?
No, I'm not. I'm 45, whatever that makes me. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, so maybe this isn't geared for you. Maybe I'm more excited about these things. Finally, the Ergatta. So Ergatta is a rower too. It's more of like a gamified rowing machine. It doesn't rely on instructors so much as it does just gamifying workouts. And actually, one good thing, kind of talking about program design and stuff like that, is the one thing I like about Ergatta a lot is sometimes with gamification with fitness is people make games and they try to figure out how to make a workout in those games. And then it makes, like, for example, the Peloton lane break, even though I kind of like it a little bit, it's a video game kind of mode on Peloton. Your workouts on that mode look nothing like how you would actually train in any other class. So when that happens, I think there's an issue. Like, there's a problem. It's too much more like figuring out how to make this game a workout, where it should be the other way around. Yeah. And that's what Ergatta does a good job as. They have gamified it, but all their sessions are actually like training sessions that you would normally do with or without a game. But they have their they've always had races, but this is the first time they're going to have multiplayer, like live races, set to begin next week. So I'm excited about that. I'm going to jump on that. Have you ever is there a way to do any kind of like live stuff or racing on Concept 2?
So that's a really
I
interesting.
I'd heard something like that maybe before, but
yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think I know some different projects. Short answer, I think you can get like the City Row Go app, right? Which is City Row is another connected rower. They're actually officially omni-channel, but and I've used that on my C2 rower, but I think that might be one of the greatest opportunities. I mean, gosh, how many CD rowers do you think are sitting in people's gyms or garages? There's probably millions, right? and they have this ability to be connected somehow. And I think I know people are working on projects like that, but I haven't seen anything in the market that truly gamifies the C2 rower.
Yeah, that'd be interesting because there are a lot out there. I'm surprised they haven't done anything themselves. Okay, so anyway, let's bring in our guest this week, founder and CEO of Sensei, Stephen Webster, an expert in AI, computer vision, and its integration into connected fitness, to get his thoughts on the Peloton Guide, as well as the potential and promise of AI within connected fitness. So let me bring Stephen in if I can figure this out. And I think
good morning. How are you?
It worked. Hey, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. All right, good to see you again as well.
Yeah, you too. He always sounds like the voice of God, you know.
I've been called worse.
Good to see you, Stephen.
Likewise.
Awesome. So yeah, Steve, I would love to kind of hear your thoughts as kind of somebody who's more an expert and understands a lot more than, us sideliners who just like to talk shit about stuff that we see,
criticize,
but we don't really have the full understanding or full picture that you might. And so I wanted to kind of hear your thoughts, because I know you were able to kind of take a look at and test out the Peloton Guide as well. There you go.
I have it here. Yeah. Well, so listen, I'll start by, the Australians have a great phrase for this: tall poppy syndrome. We all love to cheer on companies as they're growing and as they're underdogs and they get bigger and bigger. And then when they get really tall, we love to kind of cut them down at the knees. As a founder, that would be bad karma for me to participate in that. So that's not kind of my position. So, listen, the product itself, I mean, it's top-notch industrial design. I think it looks great. It feels great. Peloton are established and are really nice. I mean, it looks like the treadmill, right? It looks kind of like the Peloton tread. There's like a clear design language. And, I think that comes through in the UX as well. Now, we can get into this perhaps. I found the onboarding a little sticky. The computer vision part of the onboarding did not work well for me at all, which for me, when that's my world, I'm like, oh, come on. We want the world to see this stuff working. But, the UX of the app, the UX of the product is great. And listen, what's the thing that Peloton, I think, does better than anyone right now? It's the production quality of the content, and the content is great. But that said, in my gym, in my garage, I have a TV on the wall, and I have the Peloton app on the LG TV, and there's very little difference in parity between the two experiences. And I think the challenge was, and to be blunt, we saw this coming. Like, we've been watching the launch of the Peloton Guide really closely, and the copy and the content marketing and the emails and the website has just kept walking back away from, we're going to be able to do form tracking. So we knew when it launched that we weren't going to be seeing, we were very unlikely to see rep counting and form tracking. And for me, and for my company Sensei, form tracking is not the point of rep counting is not the point of arrival. It's the price of admission. If you can't do that, if you can't recognize what somebody's doing, you can't do anything else that's related to personalization and coaching. So I mean, I think here's what happened. And you mentioned, they acquired Otari, they acquired Atlas, they acquired Aikido, who was the voice recognition, $80 million that they're about of acquisitions. Trying to integrate 3 different teams, 3 different cultures in a remote first world where they haven't met each other before. I mean, that's a hard proposition. And the problem is hard. And I think, I think Peloton Guide is now a cautionary tale about build versus buy, and the core technologies that the example I always use is Dolby surround sound. No TV manufacturers what? As well as manufacturing and distributing TVs in different sizes and shapes, let's try and solve 7-channel spatial audio and do it ourselves. It's you license Dolby, right? Or it's not let's build a PC and let's go and design our own processor. Apple do that now. But for most companies, it was let's buy Intel. And that's how we've always thought about form tracking, is it's such a hard problem that there needs to be companies that exist that other companies use as an ingredient in their products. So yeah, Peloton Guide. I will say this. Do you remember the first iPod? The really first iPod?
Yeah, I do.
and you remember the Diamond Rio and the Sony MP3 players that even predated that? They sucked. At the time, it was magical. It was wow, there's no moving parts, there's no cassettes, there's no CDs. I can rip my own music collection. But if you think of that first generation iPod, you can Google this online for kind of the evolution of mankind. that first iPod to the experience now where I just sit in my car and I say, hey Siri, play Mark Farina Mushroom Jazz, and boom, it's playing. It took a lot of iteration to get there. So if I want to give Peloton some credit, they've got a product in market. They often say this in startup land, you should always be embarrassed of your first product. Now, I don't think that should be the case for Peloton, but hopefully they iterate quickly. I'm concerned that they've made some technology choices that means they might not iterate as quickly as they would like to. So it's going to be an interesting ride for them.
So in terms of like them improving, because from what I understand, and tell me if I'm wrong, the camera itself is more than adequate to be able to do a lot of rep counting, form tracking, and that stuff. It's just like the software within it that needs the upgrading. So what do you think they could do? And you said maybe they already made choices that is going to limit them, but what could they do to improve the Peloton Guide to the point where it could do these things?
Yeah, I mean, like if Tom Cortese, the co-founder, the chief product officer of Peloton, I mean, if he was to reach out to my team, I think there's 3 areas we would focus on. The first, and it's super techy and nerdy, but it's necessary but not sufficient, is what we call pose estimation. How do you use that camera to capture the skeleton in front of you? Previous to Essentially, I worked with Microsoft. I worked super closely with the Xbox team, and you got to think about this. In 2012, we launched Nike Fitness for Xbox, and 10 years ago, the desired Peloton experience was on an Xbox console, and the Peloton are trying to shrink that down to a lower cost piece of hardware. So that 3D pose estimation, that's a really hard problem. I suspect they're really struggling to get that to perform. They're either doing 2D pose estimation, not 3D, because there's a lot of let's draw a square around. It's like Flat Stanley's working out. We'll draw a square around you, but I have no idea, is your right hand back and your left hand forward, or is your left hand back and your right hand forward? That depth from the camera lens, as soon as you start trying to do that on a piece of hardware like this, it gets hot really quickly. And so that's something we've solved for. We can do that. We can do 3D pose estimation from just a cheap camera, but it's a hard problem. The second problem we have to solve is like, how do you recognize exercises? Like, how do I watch somebody do an exercise? Did either of you guys ever watch Silicon Valley, the HBO show?
Oh, yeah, I love it.
Do you remember the hot dog, not hot dog sketch? Now, don't go all the way to the end. It's not safe for work. But hot dog, not hot dog was like they pointed a camera at a piece of food and it said hot dog. It's like, this is amazing. Point at the pizza. And the pizza goes, not hot dog. It's because it's really hard. It's really hard to teach a machine to recognize more and more things that start to look more and more similar. And the state of the art with a lot of the companies right now who are trying to do exercise recognition is, let's get hundreds of people doing hundreds of reps and thousands of hours of video, and let's give it to a machine to eventually figure out. I've seen enough people doing a Romanian deadlift, pretty confident that's a Romanian deadlift, with zero understanding of what's the good nuance of technique in a Romanian deadlift. And, if I was teaching a Romanian deadlift to a beginner, what's the most important thing I would teach? And if I was teaching it to somebody more advanced, what's the next most important thing I would teach? And the problem with this kind of like feed images to a machine to kind of try and do AI is very slow to teach new exercises and to teach new faults. And it also makes this thing run really hot when you run those models. So that's the second thing we'd help with. But if I can just add one more thing, Colin, and I think it's the most important thing. I've talked about 2 pieces of the technology that are really, really hard, and, not to pitch our own company, but those are the problems that we solve for everyone else. In a much more scalable way and a much more performant way. But the really hard problem is lack of imagination. Like if I see one more product telling me to squat deeper, it's just how many of us were in, we've all coached, and how many of us in class, all we do is just like shout out reps and shout out mistakes. Like that's not coaching. And so I think, what I hope for the industry to understand, and, we're gonna illuminate and lead the way here, is form tracking is the enabling technology for us to deliver like a plethora of good coaching experiences. And by coaching, that might just mean you walk into a class of 100 people, but the coach knows how to get everybody, to improve by the end of the class. Or it could be as nuanced as like personal training and personal form coaching. There's a spectrum of experiences in between. And I hope Peloton can fix the computer vision. I hope they can scale exercise recognition quickly by moving away from an architecture of feeding videos of people doing exercises. And then most importantly, I hope they can just do what Apple did and like fast iterate on more and more features. And so hopefully it's like, wow, this is the best $300 I ever spent, because it just keeps getting better and better over time. But they've got their work cut out for themselves if they're going to do that.
So question for both of you guys. So when you look at this piece of hardware, is it sufficient enough? And I'm not, I don't know the tech side thing. Is it sufficient enough like a Tesla where it can completely, like the computer program can continue to be upgraded? Or do you think the hardware is going to have to continue to be upgraded too?
So I hope Peloton aren't watching this podcast, Colin, because I hacked my treadmill. All right. And I took a demo of a sensei recognizing me boxing, and counting reps of me punching and telling me to keep my hands up as I'm punching. And I took a demo of that was designed for an Android phone, and I kind of ran it on my treadmill, and it worked beautifully. It actually worked very, very well. So I think the fundamental hardware that's running on a Peloton is more than capable of running the right software. The challenge is, the software problem is hard, and the obvious approach to the problem I don't think is the right approach to the problem. And so we'll see how Peloton figure that out. But yeah, I think this hardware has got like life in it. But yeah, the really need to think about how the software is developed.
Gotcha. And so I was also kind of curious about your thoughts on, with the computer vision technology and the AI, like where do you think we are in terms of a timeline where things could actually be useful? Because I think for me, it feels like let's just say we're trying to emulate a really bad coach, like the brand new 24-hour minimum wage paid coach who can count your reps and well, it's not their fault. It's just that's how they start. Beginner level. Like you're 17 years old, you got your first job at a gym. You can count people's reps. You can say, good job, keep going. You can see some basic faults, maybe squat lower, right? So I feel like, we're not even to a really bad coach yet. And so I'm kind of curious, not a really good coach, like you're saying, is going to know the differences between each person and which step in the learning process or how to better teach them a movement based on what they're already showing and what they already understand and what they need. So like, we're not even to the bad coach yet. How long do you think it'll take before we get to AI tech and computer vision and all of the tracking systems to be able to help develop enough that it feels like a good coach?
You'll see products in market this year, products you've never heard of before, and products from brands you love, powered by a sensei, giving you exactly that experience you're left wanting for. So I love that phrase, the future's now, it's just not evenly distributed yet. I think that's where we're at. Yeah. Let me tell you about some of the experiences that we're delivering. Did we just lose Colin?
Eric. Can you hear me?
Yeah. I was going to hijack Eric. Let's just go. I'll keep talking, Colin. So let me tell you about some of the experiences that we're delivering with some of our customers right now that we think are really high value experiences. The first is onboarding. When you buy a bike, we pretty much all know how to ride a bike, and you've got to be pretty special to hurt yourself the first time you get on a Peloton bike. It's probably a balance issue, not a technique issue, right? Mm-hmm. But if you're buying a rowing machine, if you're buying a strength training machine, if you're buying a Pilates reformer, those are typically products where you would, oftentimes the proposition in the gym is like, sign up and you'll get a free 30-minute induction class with a trainer, to make sure you don't hurt yourself. We all live in a world where you can't go to the gym until a personal trainer walks you around the gym for 30 minutes and shows you how to use the equipment. So we call that, I mean, it's a good name for it, right? We call it like onboarding. And we're delivering that onboarding experience with a sensei into a number of these kinds of products that I've spoken about, where your unboxing experience includes whole coaching, right? It's not like, watch me do a power clean and now it's your turn. It's like, hey, let's just start here. Let's make sure these are good. Now let's add this part. Now follow me. Now copy me. Now I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to talk you through the movements and you do them. So we build people up and we take more and more, take the visual cues away, take the auditory cues away. So we're delivering those experiences. Another experience powered by form tracking that a number of our customers are working with us on right now is movement screening. Now, movement screening sounds really clinical. It sounds really FMS, functional movement screen. And it's not a great experience. It's like go through all these exercises and we'll kind of measure angles and directions. But I would imagine, I've never trained with either of you guys, but I would imagine if I was training with you, you take me through a fairly active warm-up, and as I'm warming up, I'm in a mountain climber, I'm doing a T-spine rotation, I'm doing a this and a that. The whole time you're looking at me, you're like, dude's got no rotation through his thoracic T-spine. He's got kind of tight shoulders here. Looks like we've got some hip immobility. And as you're doing that, as a good coach, that's just going to change the way you coach me for the next hour. You might substitute exercises. You might rethink about some of the stuff you were going to do. You might pause and hang out in a movement for a little while longer and see if you can work that immobility. So that's something you're going to see getting delivered in a number of our customers' products as well, is just as you warm up, as you sit on a rower, as you work out on the reformer, we're continuously measuring your range of motion, perhaps against the baseline of what you've done before, so we can recommend adjustments. And then, of course, there's real-time coaching and form correction and progression. But, this is how I'm really passionate about, to my third thing I would speak to Tom Cortese about. What's the best imaginable coaching experience? Not what's the best imaginable consumer experience. The best imaginable consumer experience is you have a great coach running the class. Yeah. So how do I make sure that I can create that great coach and I can deliver those great coaching experiences? And if I'm in the next room shouting through the wall to the class and I can't see what they're doing, I'm not coaching a good class. And that's what computer vision and AI solves. So to answer your question, this year, you'll see products that Peloton wish were theirs.
Very cool. Very cool. Now, another thing I wanted to talk to you about too is, because I know Sensei, with you guys have kind of, I'm sure there's more than just two, but the main focus is, at least from what I've seen, is the computer vision. And then there's wearable, tracking, which doesn't need computer vision, because if you're wearing trackers, that can assess your movement as well. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on what the difference is between the two and the different value that each can provide, both separately or combined.
Principally separately. And for us, when we started the company, I'll give a little bit of history of how we got here, and then I'll kind of back into that as a strategy. When I started the company, I was coming out of Microsoft. I'd worked closely with the Microsoft Connect team. So my view, this is like 2013, 2014, as computer vision is not going to be there in the next 5 or 6 years for fitness and sport coaching. I couldn't imagine how that depth sensor that was in the Connect, plus all the really complex software that was running on the Xbox, which is a gaming PC, all that software that was running on the Xbox to calculate time of flight of a limb. So if suddenly we can't see it, we can predict where it actually is until we can see it again. That seemed a hard problem for a phone to be able to solve, or for a low-cost connected hardware to solve. So that kind of forced me down another path of well, what about connected apparel? And that's a state of the art that I think is evolving more quickly. So that's why we went in that direction first. And yeah, you're right. We now have, we're working with third-party performance compression apparel manufacturers, Virus International in California, who are now, manufacturing performance apparel with a Sensei inside. And so that means for a connected fitness company that has a rowing machine or has a Pilates reformer or has a strength training product, they now have a companion SKU that they can sell, which is a piece of connected apparel that will unlock that performance coaching.
Cool.
I think the second place for connected apparel is, there's two limitations with computer vision. One is field of view. You have to be within the lens of the camera. And the second is light doesn't bend around corners. And we're not taking that problem on. Light's not going to bend around corners.
Colin and I will take that one.
Black holes notwithstanding. But, until we can curve light, there's always going to be a time and a place where the sport or the modality is going to dictate that the camera can't capture enough of your posture and form. So when I think about, let's just go a little nuts here. Skiing, snowboarding, skateboarding, martial arts, where two people are rolling around on the ground wrestling, trying to get each other into a lock and trying to escape a lock. Those are all places where a camera is going to struggle, and connected apparel is a beautiful solution to the problem. But what I think we're seeing right now is two things. One, a lot of connected fitness products right now, they have you in a fixed space. The product imposes that fixed space on you, which makes cameras a little easier. And then the other is customers want a faster horse. That's the way that people have decided they want to solve the problem right now. And so for us, I used to work for Adobe. And what I've said to my team, my investors, my board is, I don't want to sit in a meeting ever again and argue Flash versus HTML or VHS versus Betamax. So we decided, let's not make it an either or. Let's make it so that with a sensei, when you train exercises, all those movement screen and instructional learning experiences, they're totally oblivious to whether the data is coming from connected apparel or is coming from computer vision. And we want people to basically develop for one and get the other for free when they want to take the free one to market. And then the last thing, and Colin, when we met in LA a few weeks or a month or so ago, we also introduced the idea of room scale capture. So, the next evolution in the state of the computer vision art is how can you track 10, 20, 30 people in a room with eyes in the sky so that everyone in the room is being form tracked and getting that personalized coaching? And how do we bring the best of digital into the physical environment and not just think about how do we replicate physical coaching in a digital environment? So, I care about the transformation in both directions. Does that make sense?
No, definitely. And I think one of the parts of your presentation that was kind of illuminating of that was, the idea of a super coach, right? Where, and Eric will know a lot about this too, because
he's a super coach, right?
Well, maybe him, but as fitness studio owners for a long time, both of us, one of the issues I think fitness studios face, one of the many, is class size, like basically the costs and what people are willing to pay. And what people are willing to pay now isn't that much more than what they were willing to pay 20 years ago.
Right.
But the costs and the competition is significantly higher. So what that has forced people to do is take on more people for classes. So much bigger average class sizes. And then additionally, because there's less money, a lot of these coaches unfortunately don't get paid in a lot of these places as much as they really should. And what that leads is to a lot of coaches, like really good coaches, end up leaving out of necessity to develop their own programs and their own systems. And what's left is a lot of studios have maybe one good coach and a few coaches that are newer or maybe not as experienced. And what I saw with the computer vision was a way to allow these bigger classes and maybe these slightly less experienced coaches being able to give them feedback instantly about what's going on in the class with everybody and, help direct their attention to the right person and the right faults. And that kind of helps solve a problem where people in a larger class may feel like it's more personalized and a better experience because this great coach is seemingly an amazing super coach, when in reality they're an average coach, or maybe they're a good coach, but now they're even better because of the AI help.
No, Eric, you said something at the top of the meeting, actually, the top of the podcast, where, oftentimes in sports tech, you find technologies that are looking for problems, or you find technologists that don't really understand coaching. And as you guys both know, the founding team and like the extended team, my sales team, my engineers, we all competed, captained, coached the sports that we're passionate about. So we're very kind of coach first. And so, Colin, I coached at the University of Edinburgh for like 15 years. I coached the karate program there. I loved Freshers Week. I loved that first week where it was an opportunity to take people who had never imagined they would walk into a karate dojo. And I'm telling them, 5 of you are going to be black belts in 4 years. Forget your law degree or your medicine degree. You're going to be a black belt. You're going to graduate Edinburgh University. But, for these first months of class, I might have, 150, 200 people in a hall teaching them to throw punches and kicks at each other. That's not scalable. But I was very lucky. I had assistant coaches. I had black belts in the class. We were able to walk around. And in these big classes, one of the black belts, Paul walks over to me and says, "Hey, Stephen, all the white belts seem to be struggling with knowing to pick their knee up and do X." And so that's where I would take the class. Or maybe I would just go over and teach that part of the class, or maybe I would stop the whole class and use it as a lesson. So that idea that there's other people in the room with eyes on athletes, with eyes that can steer the direction of the training, that's where the idea for the super coach came from. It wasn't like this is cool technology. It's like this is how we used to coach. And you nailed the use case. The use case is basically, it's twofold. It's how do we scale the coach? The coach can't be watching everybody at once. And oftentimes in studio fitness classes, they're actually like sitting on an erg or on a treadmill and they're taking part in the class themselves as well, right?
Yeah.
So that's one use case, is how can I just put in that coach's ear, Stephen on erg 4 is letting his hips slide back and then pulling with his shoulders and remind him to brace his core or whatever. But the second point that's related that you made that's really important is For a lot of the customers we have in boutique fitness, that's the problem they have is like, look, we bring all of our instructors to boot camp, or we bring all of our instructors to such and such university, and we teach them our coaching pedagogy. We teach them the cues we want to use, the corrections we want to make. But 3 years later, they've forgotten them and they don't necessarily think. So this is a way for a sensei to keep the curriculum front in mind. So in your ear, it's like, Colin, Stephen's on the erg, he's making this mistake. Do you remember the pause at finish drill? Why don't you teach that to him at the end of the class?
Oh.
And it's just this delightful interaction between the coach and the athlete of, at the end of the day, and I should make sure I land this point in this podcast, form tracking is the enabling technology for personalization. It's not the enabling technology for rep counting and counting punches and counting reps. It's the enabling technology for personalization, for deepening enjoyment, and deepening engagement. And as coaches, this, like progression is retention. So, if you can get somebody to continually feel like they're getting better at the thing, they're going to come back to the next class and the next class. And isn't that the connected fitness problem? That's how we don't have a clothes rack in our living room.
It's great, man. It's augmented coaching, we could probably call it. And, I think one of the existential, by the way, great reference to Mark Farina, Mushroom Jazz earlier. I didn't want to.
There you go.
I love it. Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah.
It's really good. But the existential, you
can take the man out of San Francisco, but
yeah, totally. The existential question is like, for coaches, like, is technology going to run me over? Right? Is my profession going to be valuable in 10 years? When I start seeing this, and that's a question I get asked all the time, is like, well, what do I do with technology? I'm like, well, you got to find the tech that makes what you're currently doing right now 10 to 20% better. Right. And forget about the rest. Like, you can't take on all the tech, right? You just can't as a coach.
I heard someone else say, I've stolen this phrase from someone, and my apologies if they're watching, because I forget who to attribute this to, but it's not mine. But it's technology won't replace coaches, but coaches who use technology will replace coaches who don't. And so that's how I like to think about it. So.
Yeah. Well said. Well said.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Stephen, for jumping on. Thanks, Eric, for jumping in as well. And for anybody watching, thanks for joining us. Again, if you are listening to the podcast, you can find us on YouTube at youtube.com/connectthewatts, and subscribe if you want to watch the show live. I think we'll be planning on doing it mostly Fridays or Saturdays. We'll try to put out an announcement in advance until we figure out like a more consistent schedule. And thanks again. And I hope you guys have a good rest of the day.
Good to see you guys both.
All right. Bye, guys.